On April 23rd, 2018, on Florida's Forgotten Coast, a couple heading to a local fishing spot in Franklin County stumbled upon an unimaginable horror: the body of a woman discarded in an abandoned cul-de-sac just off Highway 98. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community. The crime was brutal. The victim had no identification. She was a Jane Doe, and she'd been savagely beaten. She had bruises from head to toe covering her entire body. The sheer brutality raised immediate fears of a predator at large in the community. Less than 24 hours later, the investigation took a turn. A second crime scene was discovered at the Sportsman's Lodge Motel in the town of East Point, Florida. Inside room 15, there was blood everywhere. The bed, the room, everything had bloodstains on it. The amount of blood loss was so significant that authorities immediately suspected a connection to the body found the day before. Authorities were able to conclude that the person attacked in the room was probably deceased, adding an atmosphere to the lingering smell of vinegar, a clear sign of a crude and hasty attempt to clean up the crime scene. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. The Jane Doe was identified as 31-year-old Aileen Seiden, a resident of Miami, which was 400 miles away. DNA testing confirmed that the blood around room 15 was hers. Motel records and a preliminary investigation revealed that Seiden had not been alone. She had checked into the room with two companions, Zachary Abell, a man she had known for years, and Christina Araujo, Abell's long-term girlfriend. Prosecutors would center on what happened inside the hotel room, and they would discover that there were dark and toxic dynamics of a throuple relationship, a three-person relationship that had spiraled into fatal violence. This is the story of the case of Aileen Seiden. Let's get spooky. Hey, spooky people. It's your best friend Kenny here, and we are back with another disturbing story. Before we get to today's story, let's make sure you're subscribed to this channel. Let's make sure that you share this video. Share this video in traffic. When you're sitting in traffic, ask the person next to you to roll down your window and just shout, "Hey, check out The Spooky Lawyer on YouTube." I'd appreciate it. Aileen Seiden was a woman whose life was defined by both resilience and tragedy long before she entered room 15. She grew up in Miami, and Aileen and her older sister Francesca faced their first devastating loss when their mother, Mirtha, died of cancer. Aileen was only 9 years old. Then, just 5 years later, when Aileen was 14, their father died suddenly of a heart attack. Aileen found herself suddenly an orphan, and she fell into her sister's care. Francesca, who was only 22, signed the papers to become Aileen's legal guardian. "I became a parent," Francesca said. "I had to take her to school. I had to pick her up from school. I had to finish my own school. I was working. I didn't have time to grieve. And I didn't think that she did either." This shared loss created a bond between the sisters, but it also left deep, unresolved trauma that would shadow Aileen into her adult years. Despite this difficult childhood, Aileen grew into a woman that was described by friends and family as independent, determined, and kind. She was gorgeous. She loved animals, her sister said, remembering her as a loyal and dear friend. Her best friend, who asked to be identified only as Allie, recalled Aileen making her own way in Miami. She worked as a property manager. She lived in a great apartment. She paid her own rent. She made her own bills. She was very independent. However, this stability was fragile. In 2017, Aileen unexpectedly lost her job, which was a destabilizing blow that coincided with her entanglement in a toxic relationship that would ultimately claim her life. Aileen had known Zachary Abell since they were teenagers. A friend of the couple's, Mike Pivicet, described him as very entertaining and very extroverted, but there was another side to him. Aileen's friend Allie noted that Abell didn't have the best reputation, even in high school. And while Aileen found him fun, Allie believed that changed pretty quickly. Christina Araujo was 8 years older than Abell, and she had been his girlfriend for about 4 years and was also his business partner in an automotive company. Witnesses described her as the dominant force in the relationship. She was very controlling, Picavette observed. He would follow her lead with stuff. A repeatedly mentioned aspect of Araujo's personality was her habit of boasting about her father's power. Her father, Tony Araujo, was a high-ranking major with the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office. Yvette recalled their first meeting, and right out of the gate, she said, "Oh yeah, my dad's a major with the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Department. If we ever get into any trouble with the law, he can take care of it." This would become a claim that she would use for intimidation and control. The three-person relationship, or throuple, if you will, began to form in 2017, but it was built on deceit. Abell had started dating Aileen secretly while still in a relationship with Araujo. Aileen was deeply in love and desperately wanted Abell to choose her. She seemed to love him so much that she was still hoping he would decide to be with her, Allie explained. He would lead her on to think he was trying to end it with Christina. Once the relationship became an open three-way arrangement, it quickly devolved into a toxic cycle of jealousy and violence. The whole dynamic started to change, where one of them always seemed to be the odd man out or was jealous. The relationship was not a functioning polyamorous partnership, but a closed system of coercive control, where abuse, threats, and dependency created an environment from which the escape seemed impossible. And violence was frequent. Aileen confided in Allie about Abell's physical abuse. She called him once to say, "You have to come here, like he hurt me again." At trial, Mike Picavet testified to witnessing Abell kick Seiden in the head during an argument. Aileen also had violent physical altercations with Araujo, fueled by jealousy. Picavet described a fight breaking out in his own home after Araujo discovered Aileen was in a sexual relationship with Abell, culminating in the two women rolling around my kitchen naked fighting. Aileen felt trapped. Despite being described as someone who wouldn't tolerate being messed with usually by anyone, she was afraid to call the police. Aileen explained that this fear stemmed directly from Araujo's constant threats about her father. Araujo's claims that her father would be able to get her out of any legal trouble, whether true or not, functioned as a powerful psychological weapon. They neutralized the normal avenue for escape from a domestic abuse situation, which isolated Aileen and reinforced the closed, abusive system. The final road trip and Eileen's desperate plea for help represented her attempt to finally break out of this coercive loop, an act that may have triggered the final, fatal explosion of violence. The Throuple's final journey together was a road trip to Texas, and it was probably related to work for Abell's automotive business. On the return trip to South Florida, they stopped at the Sportsman's Lodge in East Point, Florida, checking in on April 21st, 2018. Here, Aileen Seiden made her last known attempt to escape her life of abuse. She placed a frantic call to her best friend, Allie. She said, "I need your help," Allie recounted. Alarmed, Allie immediately began trying to devise a plan to get Aileen away from Abell and Araujo. But before any plan could be put into action, Aileen was dead. What happened inside room 15 on April 22nd, 2018 isn't completely known. A combination of forensic evidence and trial testimony paints a gruesome picture of prolonged and sadistic assault. At sentencing, Judge Jonathan Sostrom would find a label that captured the horror: a torture death. The crime scene itself was savage. The room was a bloodbath, with one of the beds completely saturated with blood and blood splattered found throughout the space. The use of luminol showed that the violence was not confined to one area. When applied in the bathroom, the entire space lit up, indicating it was a primary location of assault and the subsequent cleanup attempt. A shower curtain rod was found with a palm print and Eileen's blood on it, and so it was identified as a likely weapon. Christina Araujo's trial testimony provided a narrative for the physical evidence. She claimed the violence began when Abell started repeatedly punching Aileen in the stomach. The assault escalated horrifically from there. Araujo testified that Abell broke his walking stick over Seiden's back and then SA'd her with the stick. By the next morning, Araujo claimed Aileen was dead. Her face was so bruised and swollen that her eyes were sealed shut. The autopsy report corroborated the visual horror of the scene and the brutality described in the testimony. The medical examiner found that Eileen's body was covered in bruises from head to toe, with lacerations on her face, stomach, and legs. Her skull, ribs, and limbs were fractured. The examiner testified that the force of the beating had caused catastrophic internal injuries, with organs pulled away from the abdominal wall. The damage, he stated, was consistent with the massive trauma one would expect to see in a severe motor vehicle accident. The crime was an expression of unrestrained, intimate rage, and the cover-up was clumsy, panicked, and inept. The perpetrators were consumed by the act of violence itself, but had no coherent plan for what happened next. They attempted to clean the room with vinegar, which didn't work. It left behind an odor of vinegar, but it also left behind overwhelming physical evidence. After the cleanup, they wrapped Eileen's body, carried it out of the motel, and loaded it into their car. They drove for approximately 6 miles before pulling over and dumping her body in a secluded cul-de-sac where it would be found the next day. From there, they continued their journey south. A piece of evidence emerged from this flight, a surveillance photograph from a toll booth. The image clearly showed Christina Araujo behind the wheel of the car, a fact that would become the cornerstone of Zach Abell's defense. He would use it to argue that she, not he, was the one in control. Their flight from justice was short-lived and ended with a confession to a friend and their quick arrest. Upon returning to South Florida, Zachary Abell and Christina Araujo sought refuge in the home of their friend, Mike Picavet. It was there, on April 23rd, that the weight of their crime became too much to bear. They confessed to Picavet what happened in room 15, and he, of course, called the police. Authorities, including agents from the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, arrested the pair on April 24th, 2018. From the moment that they were arrested, they turned on each other. They immediately began pointing fingers, each claiming the other was the primary aggressor and the true killer of Aileen Seiden. The he said, she said defense set the stage for a complex and protracted legal trial that would take nearly 6 years to be completed. For years, both Abell and Araujo maintained their innocence, leaving prosecutors in a difficult position. Without a confession or a cooperative witness, proving the element of premeditation required for first-degree murder would be challenging. The case was a tangled web of conflicting stories and two unreliable narrators, with the only other witness to the crime dead. Faced with this problem, the Franklin County State Attorney's Office made a legal strategic decision. They offered Christina Araujo a plea agreement. The deal was straightforward. In exchange for pleading guilty to the lesser charge of second-degree murder and providing truthful testimony against Zachary Abell, the state would recommend a reduced sentence. Araujo accepted. This plea deal broke the legal stalemate and altered the trajectory of the case. It ensured that a jury would hear a first-hand account of what happened in Room 15, and it meant that Zachary Abell would face his trial alone. The trial of Zachary Abell began in early 2024, and it was focused on a single question. Who was the monster in Room 15? The prosecution and defense presented two different narratives. Assistant prosecutor Jared Patterson argued that Aileen's murder was not the work of one person, but a joint enterprise. The prosecution's closing argument painted a picture of Abell and Araujo as inseparable partners in life and in crime. They worked together, they owned a business together, they traveled together, they ate together, they slept together, they toted the body out together, the prosecutor argued before delivering the punchline. The only thing they didn't do together is kill on the inside. No way. The state's case relied heavily on portraying Abell as the primary physical aggressor, fueled by rage, as Araujo acting as a willing, if perhaps subordinate, participant. The state's star witness was Christina Araujo herself. On the stand, she provided a chilling, detailed account of the murder, casting Abell as the sole perpetrator of the violence. She described how he repeatedly punched Seiden in the stomach, broke a walking stick over her back, and jabbed her with a curtain rod. She delivered the most shocking testimony when she claimed Abell essayed Seiden with a piece of the broken stick. She portrayed herself as a terrified bystander who later begged Abell to turn himself in. Abell's defense attorney, Alex Morris, had a very challenging task of countering all of this very damning testimony. And his strategy wasn't to argue for Abell's complete innocence, but because that was impossible, but to dismantle Araujo's credibility and to transfer a portion of the blame onto her, which is really the only argument you have in this situation. It's obvious that they were involved in the murder. They even have a confession that the murder occurred. What you have to do is you have to attack the credibility of the witness and say, yeah, this witness was actually the one responsible. Her goal was to make her appear so manipulative and coercive that the jury would throw out her testimony. First, the defense attacked the inconsistencies in her story. Morris pointed out that Araujo had conveniently omitted key details in her initial statements to law enforcement, only to add them at the trial, which is a problem with credibility. Under cross-examination, she was forced to admit her own role in the violence, including hitting Seiden and handing Abell a paddle to continue the beating. The defense also gave her a motive, jealousy. They argued that Araujo, who was the spurned long-term girlfriend, had every reason to want Aileen out of the picture. They used a toll booth photo of Araujo driving after the murder as powerful evidence that she was the one in control, not a frightened victim acting under duress. Finally, the defense argued that her plea deal was a cynical, self-serving act of self-preservation. They argued she had accepted the deal and agreed to testify only to save herself from a life sentence, making her a liar with the ultimate motive. The defense's case was bolstered by the testimony of Mike Picavet. He testified about a history of violent, jealous fights between Araujo and Seiden. But his most important testimony was about the immediate aftermath of the murder. Picavet told the jury that when Abell and Araujo arrived at home, Abell's first words to him were that Christina had killed Aileen. Abell claimed he woke up and she was in the next bed and it was a mess. This testimony supported the defense's claim that Abell's story from the very beginning was that Araujo killed Aileen. In a strange twist, Abell's mother, Kim Clark, who was going to testify on behalf of Abell, was found dead in her hotel room the day before she was scheduled to take the stand. The defense strategy appears to have been partially successful. While the jury didn't acquit Abell, they also did not convict him of the state's original charge of first-degree murder. By elevating Araujo's role from a coerced accessory to a co-equal murderer, the defense created enough reasonable doubt about the element of premeditation to spare Abell a conviction on the most serious charge. In February 2024, after hearing the closing arguments and weighing the conflicting narratives, the Franklin County jury delivered its verdict. They found Zachary Abell guilty of second-degree murder, accessory after the fact, and tampering with physical evidence. He was sentenced to life in prison, the maximum possible penalty for the conviction. Months later, on October 18th, 2024, Christina Araujo appeared for her own sentencing hearing. Having fulfilled her end of the plea agreement, she was sentenced to 25 years in prison, with credit for the nearly 6 years she had already served while awaiting trial. She will be in her early 60s when she is released. I know that the legal process is difficult and complex and challenging for people, But in this case, it had a moment of clarity. In his sentencing remarks, Judge Showstorm gave the crime its definitive name, a torture death. And this label transcends the legal verdicts of second-degree murder. It validates the extreme horror that were Aileen Seiden's final hours and provides a powerful moral judgment on the actions of her killers. Whether or not you agree that justice was served in the courtroom, I know a lot of people don't believe that prison is enough punishment for people. Some people believe that prison is enough punishment for people. But the legacy of Aileen Seiden found a more compassionate life in the very community where she was killed. The residents of Franklin County, who were horrified about what happened to her, created a memorial poster near the cul-de-sac where Aileen's body was later found. Years later, it's continued to be maintained and adorned with sunflowers. The owner of the Sportsman's Lodge has also established her own small memorial to Aileen, shining a light every night in honor of Aileen since her murder. So what do you think? Who was responsible for the death of Aileen Seiden? Was it Abell? Was it Araujo? Was it both of them? Let me know in the comments. And make sure that you're subscribed to this channel, The Spooky Lawyer. Make sure that you like and share this video. Go ahead and follow me on Twitter, Blue Sky, and TikTok. My username is The Spooky Lawyer. If there's a spooky or disturbing story you would like me to cover, leave a comment. Or if you like this video, leave a comment. I read all my comments and respond to most of my comments. Or if you're feeling shy, send me an email. My email address is thespookylawyer@gmail.com. If you'd like to support this channel, you can become a member of this channel. Yes, I'm offering channel memberships now. And the first tier is $1.99 a month. And you can get access to exclusive content, including exclusive videos. There is also a link in the description to buy me a coffee, so buy me a coffee. I would appreciate it. I'm going to put the names of the people who have donated to this channel here. Thank you very much for supporting me. You also support me by liking, sharing, and watching my videos. And it means a lot to me that you watch my videos. And please make sure that you stay spooky.